We are Greenman Asset Management Solutions, a boutique asset management consulting firm headquartered in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We specialize in supporting organizations with large portfolios of physical assets. Our client base is made up of large, multi-tiered organizations such as airports, power plants, oil and gas, manufacturing, and maritime transportation firms. Together, we help them manage over $75 billion of assets. Our services include asset management needs assessment, policy strategy deployment, asset information management, asset investment planning, lifecycle management plans, competence management, asset acquisition due diligence, and owner's advocacy. But that's not all. Through the Greenman Asset Management Academy, we provide courses on asset management principles and practices for all levels of management. Many of our courses are now online and self-paced to fit your schedule. We also publish a free quarterly newsletter called Sustainable Asset Management Focus, which features educational and informative articles on asset management, business and finance, and maintenance management. So, if your business is dependent on your assets, connect with us today to see how we can support your asset management needs. Greenman Asset Management Solutions, promoting sustainable asset management. Visit us online today.
Just as Martha mentioned, I do like to take questions along the way because they're in the context of where the question came up. But if that doesn't work, we can try them at the end, or maybe there'll be no questions. It's so clear. I want to talk about metrics and something called GLOMI. It's a piece of work that I was working out on metric, if you would, harmonizations. But first, I always like to start, and if something's not working right, okay. Okay, go to this week. Okay. Now I'm set. Data has been something I've spent, it's been a real passion for me. And I do have a couple of quotes around it. And it's sort of like this: in God we trust, all others bring data. One that came from our Jerry Kidd, who, when I was working for Agrium, he was the rotating equipment specialist. But without data, you're just another jerk with an opinion. There was one that I enjoyed very much. If there's no data, there's no happiness.
Sorry, Dick, you're sorry to interrupt, but you need to share your screen. It didn't.
Didn't share.
Try it again.
I should not have gone to the background. That was.
Oh, no. I think it was the commercial or the ad beforehand.
Display setting. Now I need to figure out where I go to share my screen. Okay, so do I have to get out of the presentation?
No, you shouldn't have to. Just go to the share screen button on the bottom of Zoom.
Yeah, I can't find Zoom. I'm on my screen, all I see is the big presentation. Okay. Okay.
Any luck?
Yeah, but I'll have to start the presentation again. Bigger screen share. That one. Okay, share. Now we have to do this again.
No.
Okay, my apologies.
Perfect. Thanks.
I guess the first pieces didn't work quite as well as they're supposed to. Okay, so looking at my various quotes: in God we trust, all others bring data, and without data, you're just another jerk with an opinion. But the one I find is the Zen version is no data, no happiness. But if you know data, you know happiness. That came from Tom Carroll. One other one, and I think Lord Kelvin summed it up beautifully: when you can measure what you were speaking about and express it in numbers, you know something about it. When you cannot measure it, your knowledge is meager and unsatisfactory. So one of the things I'd like you to do is take a piece of paper, pencil, pen, whatever, and write down a couple of reasons why you want to measure. What's measurement to you? Why do you want to measure things? So I appreciate if you have just take a second, and even if you put one thing down, pausing for a second is so terrible. I've got a couple here, and to quantify or to understand, to compare, to get it right, to ensure correct application. To get it right and the correct application, I think of it as if I'm baking, I want to measure to make sure I'm putting the correct thing in, so what I get out is what it's supposed to be. To know what happened and to understand what might happen. Now, one of the things about this is that you put down some reasons, they're valid. These are not, the list could go on for a lot longer. But we want to measure for a large variety of reasons. Particularly like this definition, the valuable measurement process have everything to do with feedback as it impacts the future. And he says a few other things around it, but I think it's things that are trying to give you information that will understand what you need to do to change the future or to adjust the future for yourself. We have measurement in the MMP program, and each of the modules, availability in module 2, retention, training time, project analysis, forecasting, reliability, risk, effectiveness tracking, work identification, all the way through each of the modules. We have places where various metrics and measurements come up. And then a great capstone project needs measurement. Good metrics are not easy. And as we look at it, an example to talk to, backlog. Now, what could be difficult about backlog? But what's included in the backlog? Do you include PMs? Do you include work that is come in as a high priority but isn't getting done? How old is the work in the backlog? Do you only have work in the backlog that can be executed? So there's a lot of different questions about backlog, the measurement. One of my favorites is availability, and it's very commonly used. I've heard the word availability come up in a number of the different presentations that I've listened to over the last day and a half. And with availability, how do you treat idle time? How do you treat standby time? Scheduled downtime, unscheduled downtime, are they treated differently? How do they affect the availability? Questions, and I've got a slide on availability a little later in the presentation. So one of the I guess really almost a life-changing moment for me. I attended a number of the SMRP conferences, and it was 2000 or 2001. I can't remember exactly which one. I think 2000. They had had put up that anyone interested in best practices were having a meeting and looking at forming a group to develop things, and went to that meeting. There weren't very many of us there. There were about 8 of us total. We formed the basis of the best practices committee for the SMRP. And we started developing metrics to that would be part of their body of knowledge, and really started that work later that year. For each metric, we had, I would list what I'm talking about now is, if I think it's one of the more important things I'm going to say today. How do you get a good metric? And one of them we decided was we needed a definition. What were we trying to do with this metric? The second thing is the objectives of the metric. Pardon me, the objectives is what we're trying to do. The definition listed out things about that metric. Then the objectives of the metric. A formula. This is where most people jump to, the formula. And it isn't the right place to start, but you need a formula. Next piece is often forgot, but component definitions of each item that's in that formula. What's the definition of it? Where did you get that from? Another thing we put in was qualifications, and I've got some examples of a list of qualifications on the next slide. But how should this get used? What are things you need to be careful with this particular metric? And then lastly, sample calculations. And these are very important. They can help people understand how was this metric to be used. So that I've got, this is an example of qualifications for availability, and time-based. Could be weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. Tends to be longer term. Used by a lot of different people, corporate managers. A lot of different people use this one. Should be used in conjunction with OEE and TEP. Don't confuse availability with reliability. And there's a lot there. So, and also sort of looking at the definition that we used at the time, more plant type. There are academic definitions of availability that more relate to the mean time to failure, mean time to repair, that are used to develop definition, but that is more of an academic look at it. So one caution, and with metrics, and not everyone defines a given metric the same way. And who would have guessed that? You would think everybody would do it the same. And I have a couple of examples, and some can be right in your own plants. We had 10 different plants that we were gathering metrics for and comparing across different plants. And we had one very, very simple, trying to drive planning, how many jobs were planned. And I heard Doc Palmer talking this morning and getting jobs planned. And our simple little metric, it was easy to get out of the system. We would look at, was there a planned time on the job? If yes, then we would consider somebody would at least try to plan it. And that gave us a way of measuring that by plant. Went into one plant one morning, and as with the majority of our plants, they had an early morning meeting. What work came in overnight, how things have changed. And I got in there early. I got into the back of the room and sat down, and there was one of the planners, planner scheduler, who was running the meeting. And I looked up on the screen, and there was all these jobs, and he was going in. There must have been a good screen and a half full of different work orders. He'd bring one up, go in, put an hour in, save it. Next one, put an hour in. And so I asked him, what are you doing that for? Well, these are the jobs that came in overnight, and we get credit as planned if they have a planned hours in there. They weren't using the metric correctly. They had a different way of looking at it. I visited a plant. Our business was making ammonia as one of our products, and one of our competitors had been to Canada and visited us. I was in Brussels for a presentation and made arrangements to meet with some of their maintenance people who did similar things to myself, which was broadly looking across all of our operations on maintenance operations reliability. One of the questions that my counterpart had for me was, how do you make sure each of the plants are measuring things the same? And he was having trouble with that. And without good definitions, and then you have to police them, it's very difficult, even within your own organization. How do you know people are measuring it the same way? So again, not everyone defines a metric the same way, and you have to be very, very careful if you're trying to compare. Already talked a little bit about the SMRP. They had their best practices developing metrics. At the same time, there was the EFNMNS, which is the European Federation of National Maintenance Societies. And it's made up of I haven't counted them, but a large number of maintenance societies across Europe. And they had what they called their EMAC, the European Maintenance Assessment Committee. They were looking at promoting benchmarking, best practice sharing. And as part of that, they had developed metrics. They were doing the metric development really concurrent with what we were doing in the best practices committee with the SMRP. We met, and the Euro Maintenance Conference, which was in Basel, Switzerland, I gave a presentation on behalf of the SMRP on the best practices metrics. We hadn't published anything at that point. We were still, we were getting close, but, and we were wanting to put the word out. There was also from the European group, benchmarks in Europe. And they gave a presentation on what they were doing. During that conference, seeing that we were doing similar things, we made arrangements to sit down as a group with their working group 7, which was the ones specifically doing the indicators for the EFNMNS. And we developed a concept of a set of harmonized indicators. In other words, we would look at what we had done, what they had done, and say, what are these the same? How are they different? And understand any differences. This project was accepted by both parties as a joint project, and we held our first meeting in November of 2006. Process we followed. We would take the European indicator, we would take the SMRP indicator and compare, and looking at them with very much a fine-tooth comb. Put a magnet to, or a magnifying glass to them, and answer the question: common? Was there anything common between them? Or were they so different that really they were measuring two different things? If they were common, we would eliminate differences and quantify and explain. If they weren't common, in the process, we didn't deal with them at all. In looking at them, we had 3 different buckets we put them into. One was identical. These 2 indicators are measuring the same thing, and it should be giving the same result. Similar. There are some differences in the indicator as it's how it's calculated, what's included in the calculation, but we didn't think the result would be any more than about 5% difference, which in this case we thought was would give people a good. You could use the 2 of them, just being aware that it could be up to 5% difference in the. And then something that was same performance. These two indicators are measuring the same thing, but they are doing it with significantly different components in their formula, and how the information in the various components is defined. And that would tend to be what it is, how the information in a given component was defined. So that gave us a way of quantifying. We really came up with a title. It's got such a ring to it: Global Maintenance and Reliability Indicators, GMARI. And we really started that work. We issued initially with 17 indicators, had a second, third, and a fourth, where really it was just increasing the number of indicators, and the fourth made some corrections and to it. The project closed out in 2011. Recognizing that this latest piece of work, going towards something called GLOMI, Global Metrics, it looked at the SMRP, or why did we get into it? The SMRP was into a 5-year review on their metrics, and that was part of the original. Back when we really put it together, it was to be reviewed every 5 years, each metric. A harmonization project we started in 2018. Project charters from the two groups, and then plan to issue an update in 2019. Decided to harmonize to new standard. The number of indicators are the new European standards. They increased the number of indicators quite substantially. And then really the GLOMI, or Global Metricators, was issued ready for publishing in September 2020. Not an ideal time to be putting something out, but 36 SMRP metrics and 40 European. The group, and again, this is a very large, but like using the SMRP best practices, the European 15341 maintenance KPIs. We use the last GMARI as a starting point. The people on it, Jerry and Terry from the SMRP, myself representing PMAC, and then Tom, Christian, and Esfan and Cosmos were all from different country federations, which were part of the European group. So it's a broader than what our original was. Certainly it's using the best practices SMRP edition, our 6th edition, looking at maintenance KPIs, maintenance terminologies. And that's an important piece of what was done was the terminology, but also added in best-in-class values that coming from the two organizations, work order type comparisons, the terminology study and cross references, and then the KPI and metrics, which were part of the maintenance process and associated indicators. So different pieces that were added. Won't spend very much time on this. Just in this case, it is just the table of contents and a lot of different sections in it. SMRP body of knowledge, and very briefly, they have classified, and again, each organization that has a body of knowledge does it slightly differently: business management, manufacturing, process reliability, equipment reliability, organization, leader, and work management. European, again, a different take on it, that a lot of the pieces are the same, but around the maintenance function, administration, supply, engineering, organization support, people competence, health and safety, and management. So again, you're looking at it from a slightly different way. This is a list of partial list of indicators that were looked at. And really at the top, the total equipment effectiveness, or and the metric on the SMRP side was TEEP, which is total efficiency, equipment, and performance, or total effectiveness, equipment, and performance. Various ones, like, again, just to give you a bit of a feel as to what was there. I want to talk a little bit about examples, and first of all, identical. The European T17, which is mean time between failure. The SMRP 3.5.1, which is mean time between failure. Looked at them and they are identical. We did put a note in, and it is a little bit of how it's used when using the reciprocal, but it comes to the same point. An example of one that's similar, and the average inventory value maintenance as a % of asset replacement value. The SMRP is the stocked MRO inventory value as a % of RAV. RAV is asset replacement value. So not unlikely that they would be similar. And notes that are on this particular one, both indicators exclude depreciation costs for strategic parts, but the SMRP includes operating material. The European definition only includes maintenance material, and therefore can give a higher value. The difference is estimated to be less than 5%. So that would be an example of where one that's been listed as similar. Same performance, but hey, there's some significant differences. 020, predetermined maintenance hours, and the SMRP metric, preventative maintenance hours, same performance. And the European defines condition maintenance hours as preventative maintenance, which includes a combination of condition monitoring and/or inspection and/or testing, and the following maintenance actions. SMRP counts the condition monitoring and/or inspection and/or testing, and does not include the ensuing activities and corrective maintenance as condition-based. And I realize now when I try to edit this saying the following maintenance actions is part of the European, saying that if you've gone out, you've done a preventive or out to check something, and you fix it at the time, that would be included as part of the preventative maintenance hours. So they're measuring the same thing, but there could be major differences between them. This is just like, again, an example of some of the best in class values, looking at what we drew from SMRP and from EFNMS values. In some cases, there wasn't a value established. Always find the one contractor time. People were looking for what's a best practice value for contractor time. And really, contractor time is really a strategic decision. There are companies who were running 95% contractor time. There was others who would try to do everything internally. Probably not as many of those now, but certainly it's more of a strategic decision by a company. Work order types, and this is again trying to look at how people were thinking about work order types on the European side in the orange, and then on the SMRP side in the blue. And there are some similarities. I wasn't going to spend time walking through this particular chart, but there are you can look at the work order types differently. So even if you're using and think about using a formula, things about work orders and different work order types, you have to be careful that people are looking at it the same way, because it is looked at differently in different places. The one that would spend a little bit of time is and again in terminology, but trying to demystify availability. Availability is one I remember back. We had a strategic alliance with a company that made methanol, and the front end of a methanol plant is virtually identical to the front end of an ammonia plant. And really what you're doing is you're trying to get your hydrogen to work with to make your product. And in our case, it was the hydrogen to make ammonia. In their case, it was hydrogen to make methanol. So once you've got your hydrogen stream, then it branches off. But looking at that hydrogen stream, getting that was a very important part of our process, and one where were very, very interested in our availability. In looking at the numbers, the way they did, they had some significant higher availabilities than we had, and the question was why. When we got into it, they measured certain things differently than what we did, and some of the ones that get the most difference, up at the top, you've got idle time. Now, idle time can be there for different reasons. If your plant goes down because you've had a power failure and you lose power to the plant for 24 hours, is that idle time? Is it downtime? Is a plant goes down because you can't sell the product, is that scheduled downtime, or is it idle time? So there are, you get into different sort of places where you are, how do you count certain pieces of that time? And you have to be very clear on that. And it's not absolutely clear between the two organizations. If you can break down the time, if somebody's just giving you availability, fine. But if you can break down how they got that, how they're calculating it, then you can make the comparisons. If you can't, then you are likely to be looking at numbers between the two and not understanding what the differences were. And the differences very well could be in how they calculate it. Maintenance processes, again, a slide of page, and these are defined in there, but there are different ways people look at different pieces, and that just I guess to finish up on that. Guidance to different processes, relative maintenance cost, and these are things that are in the particular final version of LOMI. Value of harmonization, and a big one is around benchmarking. And when you're doing your benchmarking, you really have to be clear that you're looking at indicators that are being calculated in the same way. It's easy to compare maintenance and reliability performance across borders. I could come back and say within your own organizations. And again, one of the things that we ended up with at Agrium when I was there, we were drawing a lot of our metrics out of our system, which was SAP, and the vast majority of the metrics were being were drawn out, that we defined the measures, and then we programmed the system so that it drew it out for each operation. And so we had a very reliable way of comparing across our different operations. Having said that, that was one of the ones that we could draw out of the system we had. Beyond that, it was more difficult when you got into things like availability or downtime or how different things were scored. So again, if you're developing metrics, be clear on what you're doing, and use good definitions. This is the group. Again, we had Tom from Denmark, Isven from Hungary, Kristen from Sweden, Cosmos from Greece, Terry and Jerry from the USA, and myself from Canada. It's available through the I always had trouble with it. EFNMS and can be purchased via their publications. That I am done. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Dick. That was excellent. I was actually Googling it while you were talking, seeing where I could find it. And actually, JP has a question of that: who actually owns the publication? I guess it's this EFNMS.
JP. I think I said at one time that I expect to make enough money to get a coffee at well, it'll actually be a large tea at Tim Hortons sometime. The six of us own it, but I guess and I remember we were in discussions around how to an agreement with the European organization, and they would be the ones who market it, and we thought that they were taking us to the cleaners, and my comment to the group at the time was, I don't care. This is a piece of work that is a good piece of work. It has a lot of very good information in it. It has, and I want to see it out and available, and I don't care quite personally if any money is made on it. I would just as soon not. It'll bother my old age security. But the key here, but these are the owners, JP.
Oh, so to expand on that, he's asking, do you think there will ever be a true global standard that may become an ISO standard one day?
It's something that I think knowing how jealously guarded the two groups are, I think it would be unlikely. It would be nice. Mm-hmm. And this is the closest we've come thus far. Right. There are some, and again, we haven't done all of the metrics. We picked out the ones that are important, and you know, there's almost too many things you could measure out there. But there are some that availability would be one, but there's others around that would be useful if it were an ISO, but I don't hold a lot of hope out for that, knowing what I know about it.
Right. Well, thank you very much for your contribution to this publication. I'm sure it's been as
I said,
amazing experience to put together, really.
Yeah, no, the whole thing's been quite a journey.
Yeah. Okay. Just gonna see if anyone has any more questions, and we've got just a couple minutes. I don't see any at the moment.
Okay.
But oh no, there's a question. So from Paul Doust, are you aware if anyone has assembled maintenance and reliability metrics in a cascading, leading, lagging, showing the flow and strengths of relationships from our practices, showing value to business results?
That interesting, Paul. That is the next piece where we're going to look at is the leading, lagging, and it is interesting when you talk about leading and lagging. a metric can be both leading and lagging.
Mhm.
So it's something, but both SMRP and EFMNS has a leading and lagging document, and we were going to look at harmonizing that. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So
Interesting. Great. Well, thanks again. And just so thank you very much, Dick. And just a reminder that you can find Dick on the Feed Loop Networking tab if you have any more questions, and also that this session has been recorded for people to review in the future. So thank you very much.
okay, take care and happy measuring.
Great topic.